Hey, this is Phoebe from Love Relationships Real Talk. I just want to take out a few minutes today to talk to you about a question that's been coming up a lot in the comments section and in your emails. And that question is, how do my partner and I grow our relationship? What do we actually do to make our relationship grow or to deepen the intimacy in our relationship? Great question. It's a great question because even though I say these phrases and I try to give tips and information to back them up, a lot of times we don't know what exactly we should be doing in order to make these things happen, like learning from our relationships or making our relationships grow or become more intimate or deeper. So I have actually had conversations over the years with friends, with clients, about how they should go into a relationship and then how to sustain a relationship once they're in it. And one of the primary things that you can do going into a relationship and maintaining your relationship is keeping the lines of communication open. And I'm not just talking about, having general conversations. I mean, having meaningful conversations that will contribute to the success of your relationship, the success and the health and the growth of your relationship. And sometimes those questions can be very difficult questions to have. Me and Mark call them courageous conversations. And we don't even set it up to say, okay, we need to have a courageous conversation, because that's like, right? But we do start conversations that we know are along that line, because we're discussing something that's not easy to talk about. And guess where we usually are when we're having these conversations, just as a side note, because the setting for that conversation is very, very important. You should never have these types of conversations when you have your partner is doing something or is distracted by something. You should never pull them away from that to have this conversation. You should never have this conversation, in the heat of anything that's high emotion, right? Arguments, sex, whatever. And you should never have this conversation as we need to talk about us conversation, because that also develops a mindset where somebody feels like they may have to defend themselves, and you don't want to have that present in the conversation. So a lot of times, Mark and I, when we're having these conversations, we're walking. We walk our dog, Ziggy, which you'll probably meet one day. He's my son. We walk our dog every day. And on our walks, we end up having these courageous conversations. And it's really a great time for us to do that, because it's over an extended period of time, like an hour or more. And once the walk is over, the conversation's done pretty much. So try to find areas or settings that really would be conducive for deep conversations around your relationship. This whole topic has been present, like, in my conversations with people over time for many years. And there's like two particular incidents that stand out to me around this whole idea of having real talks with your partner. And those two situations were the same situation. My friend had just gotten proposed to, and they said yes, because it was beautiful and romantic and all of that. But that the question was still in their minds as to whether or not they should even marry this person, for multiple reasons for each person. The question was in their mind as to whether or not they should or they shouldn't. And they had those conversations with me. So the good news is that they were being honest and real with themselves about whether or not this is something that they should do. But the bad news is that they were talking to me instead of who? Their partners. A lot of times it's so hard to risk or to try to get into conversations that you don't feel like you're in control of, that you have to be vulnerable in. And so we sort of avoid having conversations that might make us feel nervous or in a space of discomfort or not being prepared for what we might hear. So the 8 questions that I prepared over the years to help you dive deeper or strengthen the intimacy in your relationship are as follows. You don't have to ask them all at once. You can ask them over time, or you can differentiate based on your relationship. It's up to you. But I think these are good starters for these types of conversations in your relationship. So the first question I have is, does our relationship nurture your needs? You ask that to your partner, and your partner can ask you that too back. 2 is, ask your partner to share a secret with you that they've never told you before. 3, am I fulfilling your most intimate needs emotionally, spiritually, or sexually? 4, do you feel safe to share your truth with me? And 5, name anywhere from 1 to 3 things I can do to support you in your dream or your passion. What is your dream or passion? 6, share one thing you miss from me that I used to do earlier in our relationship. And 7, share one word that describes how our space, our home, or our companionship space, wherever it is for you, makes you feel after a stressful day. Do you want to come to it, or do you want to avoid it? And then lastly, 8 is to complete this sentence. I realize that when I get upset with you about blank, I'm really afraid that or of blank. So I'm not going to give you any examples of things that you should say or that you might want to hear, because there are no right answers to these questions. I hope you know that. The purpose of the exercise is to build on the freedom within your relationship to be vulnerable and to be in the presence of one another, and to be able to share those feelings and those thoughts without feeling like your partner is judging you, or that you're going to be condemned for sharing what you did later on. So if you truly want your relationship to grow, your partner must feel safe enough to tell you their truth, right? I know a lot of times when we hear something that we don't want to hear, we go into attack mode. And it's understandable, because there's fear present when you hear something that you don't want to hear. So one mantra that I've used over the years to help me not be in fear mode, but to stay in love mode is just what I said, basically, is listen out of love and not fear. Listen out of love and not fear. When I'm talking, speak out of love and not fear. And you can distinguish those conversations, the love conversations and the fear conversations, in your own mind as you're having them. Or if you make a statement out loud to your partner and they are offended by it, you can dissect that statement and determine whether or not that statement was said out of fear or out of love. Do you remember the time that I told you about Mark feeling like he needed to move from our shared space into his own place? I had that conversation with myself, the fear and love conversation, and I decided to have a love conversation. And so the love conversation did not put my own needs and feelings before Mark's, because Mark was expressing the need and I was the listener. And so I acknowledged that he needed this for himself. And everything that I did after that was as a friend, out of love. And so that's one of the bigger lessons that I learned in that situation. And that's what I do now. And that doesn't mean that me and Mark don't get into arguments, or that I don't fight to be right, or whatever the case might be. But I definitely have the tools to go back and analyze, the course of that situation. And then I can also go back and apologize if I derailed the conversation because I was speaking or having thoughts that were based in fear and not in love. So good luck. Hope you have great conversations, and I hope this was helpful to those of you who've asked for the feedback and